theme for the month this month is addiction and recovery. And today we're going to talk about an offshoot of full-blown addiction. And this is kind of a holdover from the March talks, which were on a book called Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And in her work, in Brene Brown's work, and in those talks, she talks about something called numbing. When you look at for me, this is not a clinical opinion, this is my psycho-spiritual perspective on addiction, and that is that regardless of the physiological process of addiction, the root of addiction is escape. Right? So what I mean by that is, for whatever reason, whether it's past trauma or life circumstances, relationships, whatever the reason, there is something in our lives that doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right, doesn't feel tolerable. And we find something that changes the way we feel. And then the something that we were using as a tool to change the way we feel takes over. And there's a whole host of involvement at the physiological level, at the hereditary level, at the psychological or mental level, the emotional level, spiritual level. The bottom line for me is I'm not loving the moment I'm in. I'm not loving the life I'm in. I'm not loving the skin that I'm in. And I'd like to feel different. So this thing we're going to talk about today, numbing, is a corollary of that. It's just not a full-blown addiction. So numbing are those things that we do that take us away from ourselves, away from the present moment. And why that's so important, I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So I'm going to read you this quote from Brene Brown. Over time, she's talking about herself. Over time, I basically became a take-the-edge-off-aholic. But they don't have meetings for that. For me, it wasn't just the dance halls, cold beer, and Marlboro Lights of my youth that got out of hand. It was banana bread, chips and queso, email work, staying busy, incessant worrying, planning, perfectionism, and anything else that could dull those agonizing feelings. At no time during this talk am I going to ask you to raise your hand to self-identify, unless I ask everybody to close their eyes first. Then I'm the only one that will know, and I'm sworn by my license to keep your secret. All right, so I talked a couple of weeks ago about how widespread the addiction problem is. Upwards of, let's say, somewhere between 15 and 25% of the population has what could be considered a full-blown addiction, either a process addiction, which is an addiction to a behavior, a compulsive behavior, or a substance addiction. So let's start with this idea of numbing. We don't, well, let's do this. Close your eyes for a minute. If you could think of one thing that you do to check out on a regular basis, raise your hand. All right. So let's say it's 50 to 60%. That's my guess. And for those of you that didn't close your eyes, you cheated. You're going to watch a lot more carefully next time. So listen to this. Drug overdoses are the leading cause of accidental death. They've taken over as the leading cause of accidental death over motor vehicle accidents. More people die from prescription overdoses than heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines combined. Prescription drug overdoses than those other three illegal drugs combined. 95% of those prescription drugs were obtained legitimately from a prescription or illegitimately from a person for whom they were prescribed. So not like the dope dealer on the corner. We're talking about either the doctor wrote you a script to help you change the way you feel under a prescription, or wrote a prescription to your best friend, your mom, your dad, your child, your parent, your neighbor, somebody. And you got your hands on enough of it to overdose. That is so my point in saying that is, if there's that many overdoses and deaths, and almost all of those overdoses and deaths, the pills were prescribed to someone legitimately to help them numb. Now, I'm not saying that the only reason to get a prescription is to help you numb. And there are certainly times when it's appropriate to have a prescription to help you sleep, possibly, to manage pain, all of those other things. But what I am saying is that, man, we're needing an awful lot of that. We're needing a lot of help sleeping, and a lot of help with anxiety, and a lot of help with chronic pain. Why? What's going on? I don't know. Brene Brown says we numb the pain that comes from feeling inadequate and less than. Well, that makes sense to me. Because like our economy runs on making us feel less than, so we'll have to make purchases that can make us feel enough. Perhaps we had something happen in childhood that we carried around a sense or a feeling of less than. And it's extraordinarily simple how one crappy experience you can accidentally carry it into your adulthood for a very long time. And I'm very honest about the fact that I had a lot of abuse in my childhood. But I was having a conversation with somebody the other day that her particular numbing, bordering on addiction was overeating. And when we kind of peel back the layers, she could trace it to this one belief that she formed in junior high at a dance, where she felt like all of her friends were out there dancing and she wasn't. And she formed a belief around it and then carried it forward. You know, so it doesn't have to be a trauma or a major, anything major. It can be something that you or I from the outside could look and go, oh, that's just 7th grade, man. That's 7th grade. But when we form a belief around somebody and carry it forward, it's a continual source of less than. So Brene Brown says that it's the inadequate less than. And then she says that's only part of the puzzle. Anxiety and disconnection also emerged in her research as drivers of numbing. So she says, in other words, that there are three drivers of this desire to numb. Anxiety, disconnection, and shame. So shame we've covered. Shame is this perpetual feeling that I am not enough. Period. And not that something I've done is bad, but that I myself am bad. And it can be triggered in an instant. We spent a lot of time talking about that in March. Anxiety, she describes as uncertainty, overwhelming and competing demands on our time, and social discomfort. So, I want to, why is this desire to numb on the rise? So that I really want to kind of probe into that on each of these. So think about uncertainty, overwhelming and competing demands on our time, and social discomfort. So uncertainty. We have access to more information now than we've ever had in the history of humankind, and it comes at us like this, right? And no matter what we are and how conscious we become, we are still at our very core animals. And when we are overwhelmed by stimuli, frightened, anything else, what we do is experience fear and uncertainty, and we react to that. Right? We have a whole part of our brain that's been designed to keep us alive, and it still very much functions. Unfortunately, in a modern world, it can become easily overwhelmed and triggered when there's actually no real threat. Overwhelming and competing demands on our time. So let's go back to that thing like, so I ought to be this, and I ought to be that. You know, I ought to be more fit, so I really should work out, and I really ought to have more money, so I need to work a few more hours. And there's so many opportunities for cool stuff. I mean, vacations to take, and places to go, and people we want to connect with, and commitments we want to make, and service we want to do in the world. Plus, we have full-time jobs and maybe some kids, and maybe 3 jobs, or you see what I'm saying? The demands, self-generated from the number of options in the world. Whoa. Social discomfort. I don't know what I can say about that because I don't really have it. But I know people who do. So, and I don't mean to minimize that. But again, it's that, let me just say this, when you are in social situations, if you have a tape running about how you're less than, it makes it really uncomfortable. In addition, and this was a topic of conversation this morning during setup, each of us have a propensity for introversion or extroversion. Very few of us are purely introverted, very few of us are purely extroverted. But for those of us who have a good percentage of introversion, we need time to refuel in order to actually move into social situations. And the lives that we lead don't always allow for the amount of time that we need to fill our own cups. See, because introverts do that, they fill their cups with their downtime. We were laughing, and I always use Michael and I as an example. I'm mostly an introvert. I'm mostly an extrovert. Y'all don't laugh at that. Sorry. So we're doing a little shadow workshop for one of the classes we've been doing, and I think my shadow just came right out of my mouth in that introvert word. I am mostly an extrovert, but not by much, believe it or not. And so I'm actually fueled by being with people. For me, it's not large crowds, but I'm fueled by being with people. I feel my cup is filled up, I feel alive and joyful. My beloved is an introvert. She's got about 20 minutes for y'all, and then she needs a break. And it's not a criticism, it's just a reality of who she is, and it's beautiful when it's fulfilled. But like, you can leave me alone for like maybe 48 hours, maybe 24 hours, I don't know, maybe a half a day. And I am, I'm good. I need that. And then beyond that, it's ugly. I'm like looking at myself in the mirror going, there's a problem. And the shadow starts. Michael, on the other hand, you leave her alone for 5 days, and she is as happy as a pig in slop. And I mean that. Like, it's amazing for me to watch because it's so foreign to me. I don't get it. But the longer it goes on, the longer she can read, maybe watch her shows, maybe take a nap, maybe piddling is the one that really is like, it's like a miracle of existence for me. She can do little things around the house, and the longer it goes on, the more radiant she becomes. And I'm like, bam, 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 after about 36 hours. And when I say 36 hours, like at least 16 of those I'm sleeping. Okay, so when she goes out in the world, when an introvert goes in the world, it's entirely possible that just the lack of what is needed to fill one's own cup is missing, and it does make social situations incredibly uncomfortable. Disconnection is the third thing that Brené Brown mentions after this feeling of not enough, or what she calls shame and anxiety. So disconnection. Loneliness, isolation, disengagement, emptiness. This is a huge thing for me, personally. because I thrive on connection. Because I felt if there was a God that was like actually building me and putting me together, that God built me for you, for people, for relationship. And so when I have something going on with me, see, I tend to like close down a little bit, and then I'm starving for the very. I avoid the very thing that would bring me back to life. Okay, so let's get everybody close our eyes again. So regardless, introvert, extrovert, how many of you are now or have been recently struggling with loneliness, disengagement, or emptiness? Okay, thank you. We're running at about 50% right now. So, this is not easy stuff to look at. And I'd like to ask Joyce to come up and maybe not lighten the perspective, but just give us her take on that right now. She going to use this one? But I already told you all that I'm an extrovert and I need this. And I know you want me to be sane. All right. So Joyce points out something great, and I want to talk about this next. And that's a great deal of the time, what we're using to numb or what we're addicted to is common, necessary, and perfectly acceptable. Right? So we numb out on Facebook, we numb out on the internet, we numb out with food, we numb out in like just about anything we can use to numb. And so I left last week, for those of you that were here, I asked a question. I should sit with it. And the question is, does the thing that you do at any given time, so the activity that you're engaged in, does it help you enhance the moment or escape the moment? That's the difference between a healthy endeavor and numbing. Find it here in the bridge. So, it's not what you do, it's why you do it that makes the difference. Enhance or escape. You can eat a piece of chocolate as a holy wafer of sweetness. A real comfort. Or you can cram an entire chocolate bar into your mouth without even tasting it in a frantic attempt to soothe yourself. She calls that a shadow comfort. You can chat on message boards for half an hour and be energized by community and ready to go back to work. Or you can chat on message boards because you're avoiding talking to your partner about how angry he or she made you last night. Sitting down to a wonderful meal is nourishment and pleasure. Eating while I'm standing, be it in front of the refrigerator inside the pantry, is always a red flag. Sitting down to watch one of my favorite TV shows on television is a pleasure. Flipping through channels for an hour is nothing. Not what we do, where we do it from. And anything can be used to know. Spirituality, spiritual practice, talking, reading. Reading's a big one. I'm only partially wholesome in my reading. So we have to go back to that place where we can ask ourselves, what's going on in this moment? Am I doing this thing to enhance my presence here or escape? So here is, spiritually speaking, the heart of the matter. First, I'm going to say something outrageous. You'll never hear me say this again. There's only one way to God. One way. One way to God. And that is to be present where you are. Might be Jesus for you. Might be meditation. Might be service work. Might be study. Could be anything. But you have to be where you are. See, there's that old cliche about the moment is a gift. That's why it's called presence. And then one of the names that we use for the divine is the presence, right? Capital P on that one. We're all craving this peace that passes understanding. So we're craving the opposite of those things that Brene Brown says create the need to numb. It's right, the opposite of anxiety, peace. The opposite of disconnection, connection, unity, harmony. The opposite of the not enoughness, I'm made in the image and likeness of God. How could I not be it? See, we're craving those things. And when we don't have them, they're this big God-sized hole. And then we try to do these shadow comforts to feel sad. And it's never going to work. It's never going to work. And we're looking for something that's already present. And I know that we know this intellectually. I know this intellectually, and I can't tell you how often I forget. I can't tell you how painful it was to write this talk today. Actually, yesterday. Because every time, I'm like, I know this stuff. And when I know some stuff, and I forget some stuff, then I've gone unconscious about that stuff. And then I have to become conscious, which is to become aware and awake, right? And the moment that I do that, I can begin to become present again. And when I'm present again, you can hear the still small voice. And I remember it's impossible for me to be alone. Because at the very fundamental level of reality, there's no separation. And when I'm comfortable in the moment, I can hear the still small voice. I remember that peace is the truth of my being. Even if things are crazy, underneath that, there's still peace. So you see what I'm saying? You've got to be present to win. And so the only solution to this numbing thing is to become conscious. It's like you catch yourself in the act. Like, you might be halfway through the candy bar before you go, I don't even remember eating that. I might be halfway through the book before I go, what's this about? Why am I reading it? I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? So we just do it, and so the thing that I want to remind you of is this beautiful phrase that comes to us from 12-step programs that I know of, and the phrase is progress, not perfection. I mean, you can't like walk out of here and go, ooh, I'm done with being unconscious, I'm done with being not present. Because then as soon as you catch yourself doing it, you'll start beating yourself up. And then what happens when you start beating yourself up? Well, you get to numb yourself with the beating of the self. Because anything works. This is just like a fool's game. It's progress, not perfection. So what I'm knowing for all of us this week is just a little progress. Just a little bit more present. There's a beautiful, Brad, you're gonna come up. Come on down. There's a beautiful phrase from, it's Tibetan Buddhism, I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me, but do remember the phrase, and it's the precious opportunity of human birth. The precious opportunity of human birth. This is it. This is the experience. So I trust and I pray and I affirm that we are each of us making use of this precious opportunity of human birth by becoming present to it, by plumbing the depths of it and the richness of it and the breadth of it. And you know what I'm remembering from my very human experience, that sometimes to come present, we have to confront the fear. But what I'm knowing and what I'm remembering is that that fear is it's as nothing. That it's a thin veneer and it just washes away when we sit through it or breathe through it. I'm knowing and I'm remembering that the beautiful thing about the moment and guiding and directing our lives is that when we are awake and aware, we can choose what we're going to do with this precious opportunity of human birth. We can choose the direction that we intend for our lives. We can choose to be in surrender to the goodness of the moment without needing to control it. So my prayer is this, that each of us remember that there is but one life, one source, one substance, one reality, one life, God's life, my life, your life, the life of everything. And we are already living it. We are already blessed by it. We are already in perfect union with God or Allah or the life impulse, all that is. We are already at one with it. Nothing to be anxious about, impossible to be disconnected from, and equally impossible that we could be anything less than enough and more than enough. One life, God's life, all life, yours, mine. And it's enough. So I bless these words, and I bless this day, and I bless the remembering. And I bless the remembering especially that it's progress, not perfection. And as we move through our days, if we can recapture just a few minutes at a time, we will have come a long way to becoming the image and likeness of that which sent us here or birthed us. We come home again to a place that we've never been, or a place that we've been and see anew. We find then that heaven is not some place that we're waiting for to come at some other time, for that takes us out of the only place that we can experience heaven. That's right here, right now. lot of good and very, very, very